We have entered into the world of ultra processed cannabis. The same things that the food industry is doing to our food, big cannabis is doing to cannabis. I'm Catherine Goldberg. I wish I didn't have to talk about consumer safety for this industry because for the longest time, I wouldn't have thought twice about cannabis. It's a plant. I mean, it comes in all these different forms. It's great. But I read, unrelated to cannabis, that 70% of what's sold at the grocery store doesn't actually count as food because it's been so adulterated and rebuilt that it's missing its vital ingredients. And that kind of got me thinking to the dispensary and saying, wait, we know that the quality is going down. The quality has been going down since legalization. What exactly are they doing to the plant to make it worse? And what are the consequences of it? So, once again, if you have the option to grow your own cannabis legally, do it. If you can find a buddy, like the buddy system, where maybe someone grows too much, buddy up with them. I don't know exactly how to connect you guys, but I'm rooting for you. Um, I just wanted to give you this time three specific examples of how, the food industry changed food and how the cannabis industry is doing the same to the plant. Starting with, if, gummies and vapes are the most sold thing at the dispensaries, right? They're wildly popular. Well, they needed a way to standardize the THC. So, by a process of basically breaking down the plant into its component parts of just THC or CBD, they created this distillate, right? It's this 90% pure just THC isolate. It sounds a lot like what happened to whole grain to make white flour, right? The whole grain is stripped of the fiber and the minerals and the vitamins, and what you get is just this product that the body doesn't know how to use. Um, it seems a little bit similar. Um, Distillate, by the way, is used with all the stuff that they can't sell because you can't smoke it, like the trim and the leaves. Um, it's the worst quality of the weed that is processed in this ultra processed way to basically add it in to anything else. And that makes me worried when some of the pills being sold are THC, because this also reminds me of what happened in the 90s with beta-carotene, the active ingredient in carrots and sweet potatoes that's really good for you. So these scientists were like, well, it's if it's really good for you, why don't we just isolate it and give it to people in a pill? Well, a little bit within the food matrix of the carrot is perfectly healthy, but an enormous amount in isolation is actually really unhealthy and had adverse consequences. In fact, there was a group of smokers who were taking the supplement and they developed lung cancer at a higher rate than the group that was not taking the supplement because something that was once helpful as an antioxidant, once it was stripped away from everything else, it changed. So we hear there are all these lawsuits coming in. People are suing the cannabis companies because they claim, and they can't claim this, that cannabis helps with anxiety, it helps with sleep, it helps with mood, it helps with all of these things. And yeah, the cannabis plant absolutely may help with those things. But assuming one single component of the plant is going to help is a little bit delusional. Um, Before we move on to the next example, it also reminds me of one other thing. I just finished this book. I talked about it last week, How Not to Die. I really enjoyed it. Um, at the very end, this guy says, humans chewed on coca leaves for thousands of years, and it only became a problem once it was processed. So, can we learn something about this and maybe help shape cannabis in a different way so that we don't run into issues? Um, Second, we talked about why like a lot of dispensary weed is hard as a rock. And that's because of the synthetic plant growth regulators that are used that prioritize like keeping the plant short and dense over developing like minor cannabinoids or terpenes. So the flower kind of sucks. Um, Even though it's being used for a different reason, there is a process where like fruit that could get mushy, like avocado or tomatoes or bananas, are sprayed with another type of hormone regulator that basically freezes it in time and stops it from breaking down and getting gross before it can get to the grocery store. So, like, there are some similarities here, right? And this is also why, like, the tomato from the garden is going to taste a lot better than the tomato in the chalupa from Taco Bell. And I think once you start being curious about where your food comes from and how it was manipulated from its original form, it's just you start making different decisions. Um, And the third example, common practice in food, especially with spices, is remediation, right? Like they have to remove like the mold and the yeast, and they have to clean it. So they can remediate in different ways. The way that cannabis is remediated is a different process that apparently I pronounce wrong every time, which is why I haven't said it. Irradiation, which is basically using gamma waves to nuke the cannabis to clean it. This is apparently a very standard practice in Canada, and it's great for autoimmune compromised people because it makes it super clean. But maybe you shouldn't be growing cannabis at such a scale where it has to be nuked to get it clean. Like maybe that's why we support the craft farmer. Um, this is being done with cannabis. Yes, it degrades terpenes. I looked up the amount, and it's between like 5 and 20%. So it's not enormous, but if the terpenes that are first to be degraded are like limonene, pinene, and terpinolene, like our three favorites for sativa. So that's disappointing. So this is the action part of this, because I'd like to get on to talking about something else that's not about consumer safety. And I also just want you to be able to shop at the dispensary and get a product that, like, over time won't make you feel worse. Because uh, every single one of my Savvy Relief clients, by the way, the people who come to me and I help them find a cannabis regimen that works for them, it's because they used to use cannabis and it worked perfectly. And then all of a sudden, the stuff that they buy at the dispensary just doesn't make them feel good and they want to know why. Well, it's like the same reason eating Wonder Bread doesn't make you feel good, right? So this is what, if you're shopping at a dispensary because you don't have other options, because you don't know someone who grows or you can't home grow yourself, the first thing I would ask is like, is this distillate? Because if it's distillate, like you don't want it. Distillate, like I'd say distillate is like the absolute worst option. Um, if you are looking for a gummy or a vape and you can find live rosin, awesome. That means the plant is it is in its whole form. It hasn't been processed with like CO2 or butane. Um, it kind of goes back to the original methods of like hash making, which we're going to learn more about. Um, so live rosin is the best option, right? Um, in terms of hard weed, I always ask if I can look at it. And I guess like it's different by state. And a lot of people just say, like, I assume I'm not allowed to look at it, but I would ask the bud tender. Um, because I would, if it looks like it's super hard and dense, like I would pass on it. Like we know what good weed looks like and we know what bad weed looks like. And like the stuff that you get from the home grow, it's just a plant. The stuff you get from the dispensary is like oddly manicured and weird. And the reason also someone asked, why does machine trimming ruin the quality of cannabis? It's because it basically rips off the heads of the trichomes where the cannabinoids and terpenes live, among other things. So, yeah, I would ask, is is this weed hand trimmed? Because that's something I want. Um, and then the last point is I would definitely ask if the weed has been treated after the fact, if it's been remediated. Um, and I think more and more labels for craft farms are starting to say like non-remediated. So that's something I would look for, and I would vote with my dollars and purchase those brands. And it seems like the faster we wake up to the parallels between what happened to our food and the consequences that we're suffering from it now, I think the faster people will realize that, like, hey, weed's not the problem. It's the way it's being processed that's the problem. Um, so I hope this was interesting. It's been really interesting to me considering I used to consider a chalupa like the closest thing to a salad I would eat because it had lettuce and tomatoes. And I have woken up, I've woken up eating a lot better now. But yeah, so I will be back next week, and thanks for watching.